All right, there she is. Okay, first I have a bone to pick with you, young lady.
Okay.
You've never come and visited me.
That is not true. That is not true.
Wait a minute, wait. Where did you graduate? What college you graduate from?
Hamilton.
Emerson.
Hamilton.
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 Okay.
I have come to visit you. We've had coffee since I graduated.
Wait a minute. You had graduated in June, I think, and you came and you visited me then to tell me that you had won a speech contest. Am I
That's
right?
correct. Yes. You have a good memory.
And I said, wonderful. I said, that's wonderful. And I said, did you take many speech courses in college and high school? You said, no. I said, well, how'd you do it? She said, well, I called home. I said, Mom, send me my speech notes. And she sent you the speech notes. And she said, and you said, I won first place. And I said, well, that's wonderful. And you said, that's not the best part of it. I won, I forget how much money.
I won $5,000.
$5,000, yeah.
I bet you those colleges are not giving out cash prizes this year.
So you see, I do remember, honey, very vividly. And that was
I think I've been back since then, though. I'm pretty sure I came back after law school or to tell you I was engaged. I try and pop in whenever I can. And now I'm here.
Okay, now you're here. Now there's no excuse. When
Yes.
this COVID thing is over, we'll have a nice lunch somewhere. Okay?
I would love that.
I'll take you to lunch. Okay, here's what we're going to do, honey. Now, this thing is all about you. You understand?
I know, which I was very disappointed by. For the record, I thought I was interviewing you.
No. This is all about you. And we're going to start. Did you leave here after 8th or 9th?
8th.
Okay. You're going to pick us up where you left after 8th.
Okay.
Take us all the way through your schooling, et cetera, when you got out of school, your business, everything like that. And then when we are finished with that, then I will ask you some questions about remembrances of the day's school and things you remember, anything like that.
Okay, that's much easier than where I thought we were going. So I graduated the day school in 2000. I went to the Taft School. As you know, which I hear is still very much the done thing. The day school definitely encouraged going to boarding school. And my father had also gone to boarding school and it seemed like the right fit for me. So I went to the Taft School for 4 years. I can't say that I would make the same choice for my children going forward, but I survived unscathed, I guess you could say. I think I had a better education at the day school than I think I got at boarding school. Not to say I didn't come across, a handful of great teachers along the way, but I would not say that I felt like I got the education of a lifetime there. Definitely learned to grow up pretty quickly. As is the case with boarding school, you don't have much of a choice in that regard. And I'm glad I had a good head on my shoulders going into it. I also learned that Florida athletes are not really athletes. I came out of the day school thinking, oh, I'm on the varsity lacrosse team, on the varsity field hockey team. I know what's what. And then you end up in New England against kids that really know how to play lacrosse and field hockey. And you find yourself in JV for 4 years. So that was Taft for me. I then made the very, very foolish error of following my high school boyfriend to college. I'm not embarrassed to say it because hopefully someone someday will learn from that error. And I went to Hamilton, which was basically like a large boarding school. Very similar in terms of appearance and demographics. And I immediately was drawn to the government department there. They call it government, not political science. Most schools actually nowadays call it political science, but my BS is in government. And not surprisingly, I was also drawn towards the communications department, which, was not necessarily run by the most, book smart, studied, I don't know how you'd call it, the people who ran that department, but street smart And so I think I learned a lot actually from some of my teachers in the communications department. They took a very similar approach to speech that you did. So I kind of picked up right where we left off, and that was a great thing for me. I didn't love campus life. Not surprisingly, I split up with that boyfriend pretty quickly into my Hamilton experience, and I considered transferring, but Hamilton is a no core curriculum school. So having not chosen core curriculum subjects my first year, if I were to have transferred, I would have been forced to repeat a grade. So I decided to stay, and instead I did 2 domestic study abroad programs. One of them in Washington, D.C., where I was a White House intern in the Bush administration. And the funny thing to me now is, 4 years ago, you talked about George Bush and people hated you. Nowadays, everyone's like, oh, I'm totally fine with that guy. So I can admit to that freely now. And then I went from, I loved working in politics. I did not like DC. I found DC to be a very divided city. And I've never considered myself someone who stood so firmly on one side or the other. So I didn't enjoy being in such a divided city. And I went from there to New York for the summer and worked at a small conservative political think tank, which was also very interesting. And then I returned to Hamilton for my junior year and then applied to spend another semester domestically abroad in New York City. And I got an internship with Fox News. Still something people don't like to hear me say, but that's too bad. That's where I worked. I loved it. I had the most amazing experience there. I got staffed on a show that was basically going under with John Gibson was the host at the time. And because the show was failing, had very, very slim staff. And so I actually got to do a whole heck of a lot, which was a terrific experience for me. I was told I did not have a future in broadcasting. And so I continued my original path, which was to go to law school. So I kind of had a one-track mind on that. I'd always been told this is what you should do. My father had also gone to law school, so he strongly encouraged it. And I knew I wanted to be in a city, preferably New York. So I only really applied to law schools in New York, I think 1 or 2 in DC. And I was accepted at Fordham, which also happened to be where my father had gone to law school. So that was kind of a proud moment for both of us. And then I moved to New York. Just before moving to New York, I met my now husband down in Palm Beach. I was hostessing at Cucina on my Christmas break from college. And it was actually one of the best jobs I ever had. I loved working there. And the funny thing was so many fellow parents from the day school would stop in and they would say, oh, you're working? That's so interesting. I'd like to.
You say Cucina's, honey?
Yes.
Cucina's?
Mm-hmm.
You had to run into me because I was there once a week at least. Mrs. Greco and I would go to Cucina's.
So yeah, I was a hostess there, and in the summers I was also a waitress. In the summer, I was a terrible waitress. I spilled coffee on someone once. I was much better served as a hostess. And my husband had come in with a group of friends who was visiting from New York. He was staying with a former day schooler, Richard Weissfish, who was only at the day school for a short time, so I'm not sure if you remember him. And we started a long distance relationship, and I was moving to New York to go to law school. So that turned out all right. And I really liked law school. I liked the people I met. I really liked living in New York. I felt like I had kind of finally found where I was supposed to be. So law school, I would say overall was a great experience for me. Looking back, I wish I had maybe worked in a law firm or just worked in some capacity before going to law school, because you kind of get, you graduate law school, you take the bar, and you kind of don't really know what you're doing. And I graduated into a bad economy. I was fortunate enough to get a job doing something I thought I was really going to like, which was fashion law, which is really just a nice way of saying that you represent small fashion companies, but generally do, corporate law, a little bit of intellectual property. I did that for 2 years and I got pregnant. And let's just suffice it to say that the partners were not so happy about the fact that I chose to get pregnant. So they made the decision very easy for me to walk away. I never envisioned myself as a stay-at-home mom. And it's 7 years later, and I wouldn't change any of that. But I do think that there will be a second act for me. So that's kind of where I stand professionally. Personally, I never thought I was leaving New York in a million years. I had like a poster on the wall that said New York or nowhere. I wore the sweatshirts that said New York or nowhere. I did not envision myself back here. And COVID happened, and I have 3 little kids. And we left New York City for South Carolina, which is where my parents live now. And we were living there for several months, and all of a sudden realized that there are other ways to live, which when you're in New York, you start to really think there are no other ways to live. So we got on the phone with our very close friends, the Isaacs, Tiffany Marks, now Tiffany Isaacs, and her husband found us an amazing house, and I came and toured the day school and spoke to Martha and loved her, and here I am.
That's it.
That's it. That's the whole story.
Now, what's your husband do, hon?
He does real estate finance.
Real estate finance.
Mm-hmm.
Where's he from originally? New York?
He grew up in New Jersey, but he went to high school and then college, grad school, everything in New York. His whole family's there. So this was a very big move for him.
So here you are.
Here I am.
You have 3 children, 2
I
boys,
do.
2 girls and a boy.
2 girls and a boy. I have a first grade girl, Erin. I have a pre-K boy, Cyrus, and I have a pre-primary girl, Sydney.
Uh-huh.
My fondest memories of the day school, and the reason I felt really confident about sending my children, was that I felt like the day school has such amazing traditions, and I think traditions are really important for children. There's so much that changes and so much that is constantly changing in this world, and to have some constants, I think, is really nice. I loved the Banquet of the Gods. That was always one of my fondest memories. Grammar for Gremlins, of course. And I will tell you, since you asked the good and the bad, one of my fondest memories is of the poetry contest. But I will tell you, one of my least fond memories is also the poetry contest, because for some reason, and I don't think it had anything to do with the curriculum, I developed a very strong interest in the civil rights movement at a young age. It was just something that I found interesting. And I chose a Maya Angelou poem that was definitely from the perspective of a Black woman. And I was told that that was not an appropriate poem for me to recite. And I was told I had to choose something else. And I have always been stubborn, so I wasn't taking no for an answer. I did find another Maya Angelou poem that was satisfactory to the faculty at the time. And I was really proud of my performance in that moment. And I think public speaking is so important. So I'm really glad I participated in it, and I have very fond memories from it. And I think it was beneficial to everyone who participated. But I do also have memories of there being a bit of a closed-mindedness to some of the faculty who are not there anymore. And that was something that gave me some hesitation about returning to the day school. Now, granted, I know the whole world has changed a lot in 20 years, right? So it's been 20 years since I left. And I think that, Palm Beach has changed, and, the school, I think, has changed along with it. But I would say, my only real negative memories would be kind of related to that closed-mindedness. And The only other thing was that, and I've talked to many of my close friends after the fact, was the, what is it called? When you separate kids like into the tracking that is still going on. But back then, once you were tracked, that was it. And there wasn't a whole lot of movement. And I have, I was very fortunate in that I actually repeated a grade at the day school and was moved into the A track. And that's where I stayed for the remainder of my time. And that was an amazing experience for me. But I have other friends who are really quite bright who were not A tracked, and it stayed with them because they knew they weren't A tracked, and it affected them and still affects them to this day. And I think that was an error. But going back to the positives, my favorite classroom was always yours. I was always completely terrified because grammar has never been my strong suit, and it still isn't. You would be appalled by my writing. But I've always been more of an ideas person, I like to say. But my favorite memories are definitely watching you eat people's pieces of paper, telling them that, and myself probably, that our essays reeked of mediocrity. That's still my favorite line. I use it all the time. That's still my favorite line. And I still completely remember vividly standing in your room during the speech presentation, and my parents being all the way at the back, and how nervous I was, and how your podium always kind of rocked just a little bit. And I still think that was kind of the moment that I became a confident public speaker. And having that self-confidence and that self-awareness at such a young age, I think really helped me professionally and personally.
Let me ask you this, honey. Do you remember your 10-minute final speech?
Yes, no, that's the one I'm talking about. I don't remember what it was about.
Okay.
Couldn't tell you.
10 minutes in the time, 9 minutes to 11 minutes, the pressure that you were under. Do you remember your 75 lines in Julius Caesar?
I do. Sometimes it comes to me.
Do you remember your 75 lines in Cyrano de Bergerac?
I still love that book. I love that. Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say the books we read and the assignments we had stayed with me more than books and assignments I had in high school. I can't tell you exactly why that is, but they did. They stayed with me more. And my experiences with my teachers at the day school stayed with me more. And
you remember the Count of Monte Cristo?
I do remember the Count of Monte Cristo.
When I talk to kids coming back, I'd say 80 to 90% of them, when I say, what was your favorite? The Count of Monte Cristo. Whatever it is, I think, like many people, the outstanding part is when he discovers the gold and all the jewels and everything. He finds the fortune, Yeah.
I also distinctly remember Something Wicked This Way Comes. That stayed with me.
Which was that?
Something Wicked This Way Comes. No?
Repeat that again, honey. I'm a little hard to hear.
Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh. That was with Mr. Bayless.
Oh, okay.
That was with Mr. Bayless. You had him in 7th grade, right?
I know I had him twice and I had you twice.
Right. Okay. Yes, he did that that's where you got that. Yes. Going about the poetry thing, let me just tell you this, for whatever it's worth, in that they always asked me to be a judge. I would never be a judge in that thing because I used to have very different opinions on who won and who didn't.
Gotcha.
Always bugged out. I'd say, well, it's not fair. I have them, but I would never. I'd say get someone from out of school or get some lower school teacher to do it.
Smart.
So anyway, okay. What do you do athletically, physically? Do you run? How do you stay in shape?
This is going to be a little bit out of the box, but my favorite form of exercise, and I do like to exercise quite a bit, is trampoline cardio.
Trampoline Cardio.
Mm-hmm. I bet you weren't expecting that one.
A regular trampoline?
Not a regular trampoline. It's a fitness trampoline. It's I don't have great knees, which I know I'm talking to the king of not great knees.
Right.
But I used to be a runner. I ran cross country in high school, and my knees just couldn't handle it. And trampoline cardio is far less pressure on the joints, but you still kind of get that runner's high from being on it. So I do that, and now I do it from home.
You do it from home. That's all you need. I had when I was running before I had all my orthopedic operations, but I had one of those little trampolines. It was about this round, and you put it on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You got on it and ran on it. Is that the
Yeah.
kind you have? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. I had one of those, and I remember it was a good workout. It was
it's a great workout, and it's much safer for your joints.
Right.
It's not so safe around 3 small children.
Right. But there was nothing like getting out on the bike trail and jogging a couple miles up.
No. I now just know my limits. I can run about 3 miles without having any knee trouble. And I love running around here. I mean, it's beautiful.
Right. Have you had any orthopedic operations on the knees, honey, or anything?
I haven't. So the issue with my knees is that I have a tight IT band, and that when it gets too tight, it releases a fluid into my knee. There's really not much they can do for it.
Okay.
So I have been fortunate that I haven't had to have any operations, but I know who I would go to. Also our year, the Hodges.
Is he? I don't know if he's still around or not, Dr.
Not
Hodge,
sure.
because he put my new knee in. He put a new knee in for me. Greatest job anyone ever did. I mean, that knee was sticking out, and it's been how long now? 15 years or?
Wow.
But I don't know if he's in the area or not.
I'm not sure if he's in the area. He actually might be out west. That was actually last I heard is he was out west, because I'm still in touch with Caitlin, and she was out west visiting him.
Where is Caitlin in the area?
She is not in the area. She's not in the area. But the other day I did have the pleasure of having lunch with Helen Cyrus and Samantha Abbott and Emma Rigby, who are all back in the area.
Yeah, Abbott. I remember her. I remember all of them. Yeah.
They were very nervous for me. They were worried that you were going to ask me grammar questions and that I was going to get them wrong.
No, I won't ask any whom questions.
Please don't. I would disappoint you, and nothing would make me sadder.
My goodness gracious. Well, let me just say this, honey. When this thing is over, and I think it's going to eventually be over, they're going to develop a vaccine. I think the vaccine will be developed in another year or so. I think the herd thing will take effect eventually, from what the scientists claim. And when that is safe, we have to have lunch together. Absolutely.
I very much look forward to it.
Absolutely.
And then you have to let me ask you all the questions that I want to ask you.
Everything you want to know, dear. So go ahead. What questions do you have? Any questions?
Yeah, no, what do you think? I mean, I know obviously you focus a lot on grammar, and that's what a lot of people remember, but I always felt like that really wasn't what you were trying to impress upon us, was, just strictly grammar. So I guess my question would be, what is the takeaway that you hope that everyone who leaves your classroom at the end of a year or 2 year, what is it you hope they take away from their experience with you?
Well, honey, remember this. Actually, to say I taught some grammar, not much, because most children, how old's your youngest?
My youngest is 2. My oldest is 7.
Okay, that 7-year-old, even your 7-year-old has all the basic grammar right now. He was born with it. Now, this is a controversial thing, but he was born with that basic grammar. What I teach is some basic grammar that will help a person assimilate certain rules and make them better writers in that. But mostly what we concentrated on was usage. Do you say, give the water to Mike and I, or give the water to Mike and me? Well, it's me, but that's usage. That's not grammar. Now you have to know some basic grammar, objects, direct object, stuff like that. But most of what we did was usage. Lie, lay. You say, often I have laid here or often I have lain here. Remember, you had to memorize those.
Yes, a lot of memorizing.
You remember that memorizing? So all those, but that was all usage. But what I tried to do, if you recall, we did a lot of writing. And remember the articles we did? The first article, paragraph, short, you had to give me the author's main ideas. That was reading comprehension. What
Right.
were his main ideas? Don't give me any of his examples or anything. Main ideas. And then in the second paragraph, your opinion. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What? And the whole purposes of all of that and all the reading we did and everything was to start people on their ways to being critical thinkers. Being critical thinkers. And as I mentioned to all of you, and so many of you remember from the other kids, I not always say this the first day of new kids coming into class. Well, how do you get to be a critical thinker? Well, number one, you got to be a good reader. If you're not a good reader, you can't be a critical thinker because you can't get enough information, sophisticated information. You got to be a clear writer, not a great writer, not a beautiful writer, a clear writer, so that you can express your ideas. And those two things are basically what the school is concerned with, teaching to be those two. Now, the third thing you need for that critical thinking, you got to be fair and objective. That's a little harder because most of that you're going to get at home, or we hope you get at home.
Right.
We try to do some here, but you know. And the fourth thing you have to be, you're going to have some moral courage, because if you're a critical thinker, and as most of the students, and even at sixth grade, have already discovered, if you're going to disagree with your peers on certain things, as you knew in class, with some of those people I'm telling you about. You're going to disagree with your government. You're going to disagree with your church, your synagogue, your mosque. You're going to disagree with your parents at times. And that's not an easy thing to do. But to have those four things, you're on your way to being a critical thinker. Those last two are hard. Those last two, if you've been
No.
huh?
They are. I think I think sometimes it's easier in your 20s and teens to really think you're a critical thinker, but you don't have the perspective that I think you really need to be one. So I agree with you that even though you think you might be one a little younger, you don't get there until a little older. And I don't know that I'm all the way there yet, but the one thing I would say where I think you also contribute to that, which is kind of a piece of the last one, the moral compass piece, is I really feel like you helped us have confidence in ourselves. And I think that you can't be a good critical thinker unless you feel confident in yourself and that your ideas are valid and they're worth hearing. And I think that that's something that I learned at a very young age, thanks to you and Debbie Burke and Debbie Stansel, who's no longer Debbie Stansel, was to, feel confident and feel like you had a voice that was worth hearing. So that's what I think I also got out of your class. I definitely did not get the usage part correctly. That went out the wayside.
About that. I wouldn't worry about that.
I'd like to think critical thinking is a more valuable lesson.
Anything else?
So, can you write an advice book?
An advice book.
Yeah, I think we're going to need one because I'm not sure that you're still going to be teaching in the same capacity to get all three of my kids through your class. So there needs to be some kind of a rubric for those who are going to follow in your footsteps, because we all learned so much from you, and all of these tidbits of both knowledge and also just kind of the little funny parts.
Honey, they asked me when school started 3 or 4 years ago, they were asking for quotes. Give us a quote for the new students coming in. And I thought about it and I couldn't think, what I came up with? work hard and be kind. Work
Oh,
hard.
that came from you. That's interesting.
Yeah, work hard and be kind. That's going to get you a lot through a lot of things. Because if you work hard and if you're kind, that kindness is probably going to turn into empathy. And if you can have empathy, that's going to put you well on the way to critical thinking. I would say almost impossible not to be a critical thinker if you don't have empathy. If you can't put yourself in that other guy's shoes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean there. Yeah. So work hard, work hard. You said you like the tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Tradition. Well, honey, what's so important about tradition, especially with children? It's security for them.
Right.
It's security. And no matter the child, whether they're bright, whether they're not so bright, whether they're this or that, security is the most important thing to them, that they feel secure. And of course, most of that they get from the family, or they should get from the family. They should get from the family. But that's one thing I'm in favor of tradition. There's a lot of stupidity involved with tradition. It's taken to the degree where it becomes ridiculous. But the idea of that tradition, that security that gives to children, and I think it's very important, as you do.
No, I do, yeah. And I'm happy they're gonna, I loved where they were in school in New York, don't get me wrong, but that was a big piece that it was missing. It was a newer school. And even just watching my daughter get to raise the flag the other day in the courtyard on the lower campus, I thought, well, that's a tradition that she wouldn't have in New York City. And that's a memory she's going to have. And that's something she's going to see happen, her whole life, and a moment that she's going to get to be proud of. And it's those little things that I think make a very big difference.
Well, honey, I'm going to let you go now. It's been so nice. And as I remember, you're coming in to see me the June you graduated from Hamilton and telling me that you won a speech contest. That stayed. That stayed.
I think I should be buying you then lunch, by the way.
Never, 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 never. I refuse. I absolutely insist on always paying for lunch when I go out with. And I've had many kids come back and we've gone out and everything like that. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.